Demystifying SEO. It's our advanced SEO webinar. We've done a beginners on this that you can find on our industry portal and watch the recording of if you find we're a little bit ahead of where you'd be for your current knowledge for SEO. This is going to be a great one. We have Justin from Miles Partnership here, and he's going to share a lot more details about how to get your search results for your website and your content up higher and get a little bit more return on that. If this is your first webinar, I don't think it's our first webinar for any of our attendees, but for any of our people watching the recording, if this is the first one you're checking out, be sure to look at our others. We have the full lineup of a lot of our webinars that we've recorded on our industry portal, so you can check those out. They cover everything from sports tourism and bringing back youth sports to, again, we've done some creating story content online, grant writing, all group travel. We've covered a lot in this series, and we're going to keep covering more. We are going to be continuing this series, and we might just change up our frequency as we move through recovery. So be sure to keep an eye on our schedule on the portal and see what's coming up. And if you miss anything, you can always watch the recordings later on. This is all part of our Sunshine Plan for Recovering Tourism, which you can find a lot of different free opportunities and paid opportunities on the portal. So be sure to dig around in there and see what's available, because a lot of it is available at no cost, and there's a lot of good educational content there as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kick it over to Justin to get us started with demystifying SEO.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Just to make sure you can all see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right, perfect. I am Justin Gibbs. I'm the Director of Strategy and Insight with a focus in SEO at Miles Partnership. I've been at Miles for just over about 5.5 years now, and I've been doing SEO for closer to 10 years. So this is pretty much the only thing I've been doing with my life. Today's objectives is to just demystify SEO in a general sense. We want to empower you, leave you feeling a little bit more smarter and a lot more confident with the items that you're taking on that might help SEO, that will actually be beneficial, discuss the ways to get the most out of us as your SEO partner, and really connect SEO to the content process, which is where we're going to spend most of our time today. The purpose of SEO, as you probably already know, is to get that good free traffic out of Google, to boost your organic search traffic on your website by making your content a little bit more intelligible to search engines, and really just helping it rank higher in search. So we're going to talk about 6 kind of general topics today. We're going to go through just a few ranking factor overviews, go through SEO for site editors, where we're going to probably spend most of our time. We're going to cover some SEO research tools, some of my favorite tools, some paid, some free. Go through some higher level trends in SEO. What have we seen over the last few years, and what is coming here in May, actually. Understanding the reporting that you might be receiving if you do have an SEO vendor currently, or if you ever do dabble with the SEO tools, just to help you kind of define some of those terms a little bit better, and send you with some resources for additional learning in case you're wanting to dive into this a little bit further. A big question, though, I just got asked this morning: should I invest in SEO? Short answer, of course, I'm always going to say yes. But by investment, I mean, should I hire somebody to work on this as part of their job, or should I actually hire like an outside agency? I will always say, do invest in SEO if you can afford around 6 months of investment without an immediate return in results. It does take some time. A big issue in this industry is that people try to put a bunch of money into it for a month, 2 months. They don't see those immediate results, they give up. If you can't spend that 6 months without really seeing immediate results, if you can't afford that, you might not want to engage with like an outside agency. But if you can, 100% recommend doing so. So there's over 200 ranking factors. There's probably closer to 250 ranking factors that go into evaluating your website when it comes to Google. So we're not going to be able to go through all 250 of those today, but we're going to talk about more high-level factors and things that are really the more important factors. So of those 200 factors, if we want to simplify it a little bit, we can think of it in 3 different pillars. During our basics, I said that there was 4 pillars, and I'm just including the optimization part within the content here, which was the 4th pillar. But essentially we have content, backlinks, and technical crawl issues. So do I have what people are looking for? Are there links throughout the web that kind of act as votes of confidence that we are who we say we are and that we are a valid source of this information? And is our content even discoverable by and crawlable and indexable by the search engines? Because some small little technical mistakes can leave your site completely in the dark, essentially. But to break that down a little bit more further, we have this periodic table of SEO success factors from Search Engine Land. This, I'm going to leave this here in the deck so you guys can reference it later. This is a great top level, here's a factor. Is it good? Is it bad? What is Google measuring against my website? So they break it down a little bit further and they look at content, SEO, site architecture, backlinks, trust factors, social, and personalization factors. And so simply put, if you want to read this, if you're using this chart in the future, if I have quality content, that's giving me, take it with a grain of salt, but it's giving me +3 bonus points in SEO. If I have very thin content and I'm just creating pages for the sake of having that page or that keyword represented on my website, it actually can work against us because of Google's algorithm back in 2007, where they started hurting sites that have thin content. If you're just doing it for the sake of having it up there, it might actually be working against you in a way. And if your content is very heavily laden with ads with very thin content that's unique to your website, things like that would work against you. Where when you have high quality content that has research that you've put into it, you're actually citing your sources there, you're using the keywords that you want to rank for, as well as the semantically related keywords that people might be expecting to see if they're reading about a certain topic, whether it's engaging and if it's fresh. I think that the freshness factor is something that is often kind of confused in SEO. So this would be one demystifying factor here. You don't have to blog every single day for your content to be fresh. The more important factor around freshness is really if it's still relevant. So if you have an events calendar on your website, but everything has been expired and you don't have any new events for 2021, that's not going to be seen as a fresh site, right? But if you have articles, landing pages that haven't been updated in several years, but all the content is still spot on and the details haven't really changed much in the last few years, that's still fresh. That's still a good piece of content. So you don't need to create new content constantly just so that you have that freshness factor and are continually creating content, because again, that will likely lead to thin content, which works against you. I'm not going to go through every single one of these guys right now because I don't think that we will have time for it today. But just to leave this here with you guys as a resource. The last one I will touch on though is personalization. So if I'm looking for things to do, and let's say I'm looking for things to do in Louisiana and I'm in Mexico and there's not a Spanish speaking website for that. Or if your website doesn't, let's just say it doesn't have a Spanish speaking section, we wouldn't expect that website to rank anymore because it's not serving the audience who's looking for it. So there's a big personalization factor there with the country that you might be in, the locality, the language settings on your browser, and your browsing history. So even though you might rank really well in search results, when you go looking for it on your own and you're doing your own searches, you might see different, and you will guaranteed see different results than your neighbor or somebody on the other side of the country or someone in a different country, because they really try and create this personalization. And that's why we like to use ranking tools, because those tools are a little bit less treated a little bit less biased. They don't have all of the search history behind them. They use proxies. And so it's just a little bit more accurate, or a lot more accurate than it would be if you were to search yourself. All right. And I mentioned the technical stuff. A big part of the technical issues is my content or my website even indexed in Google? And there's a very easy, quick way to do that. And that is by using search operators. So I noted up here that you can use search operators as a way to really make the search engines work for you, where when you just insert keywords, you're kind of just, you're just kind of giving it up to Google and saying, all right, you give me whatever content you think you want me to see. If I'm using the correct search operators and good combinations of them, I can really get exactly what I need out of Google. So it's a very powerful tool, even outside of you trying to do SEO on your own website. If you're just browsing the web and you want a more intelligent way to use Google, search operators are the way to do it. I left a link at the bottom so you can learn more of them. But the one I really like for SEO is just site search. So I can put in site : and then a domain after it, and I'll get a list of every single result that Google has for my domain indexed in the search engine. So it's a great way to say, like, hey, is this specific page that I just created, is this in search? Has Google indexed this yet? And you can put in the full domain or the full URL, and you can get that information very quickly. So if you're worried about technical issues and that you might have a no index tag or something blocking you from ranking, this is a great way to just quickly figure out that you do or do not have that issue. But like I said, we're going to spend most of our day talking, or most of our hour here talking about SEO for site editors, because that's really the area that most people have the ability to impact on their website. As a site owner or as a content manager or as a business owner, you might not have the development skills to go in and work on all these like nitty gritty things, but you can make tons of impact just using proper structure and editing your website, essentially. So SEO is going to really take place at a crossroads between content, having that content, and optimizing it correctly. So having it, on its own may be enough, but if you can optimize it and really focus it towards those key terms you're wanting to rank for, that's where you're going to see the most benefit. So just two quick definitions, because I'm going to reuse these terms quite a bit through this presentation. Synonymous keywords, synonyms. I think we all know what a synonym is, but it's just a word that is essentially has the same meaning as another word. We're using this instead of for single words, we're using it for search terms or phrases. So things like fishing in Louisiana, I'm going to use that as my focus keyword today as we go through and kind of pretend to optimize a page. But a synonymous keyword might just be Louisiana fishing or go fish in Louisiana or anything else that has that same intent behind it. Then there's semantically related keywords, and these are related terms that are really necessary to support that topic in a complete way. Sometimes I call them ancillary keywords. But for example, if I'm talking about fishing in Louisiana, I should probably also be talking about largemouth bass. I should be talking about catch and release. I should be talking about Cross Lake. I should be talking about other fishing destinations. I should be talking about what I need for my license, like fishing licenses and laws and all of that stuff, because that's really more important than just creating an article that mentions the word fishing in Louisiana a million times. So it's very important to kind of understand that you have two primary buckets of keywords that you're going to be thinking about for any one page. So we're going to kind of do like a mock optimization here for this exercise. So first, we're going to pick our path. Am I creating a new piece of content, which is probably what we're doing more often than not, or am I just optimizing an existing piece of content? When you have a very large website, it can be a very good exercise to go through, make sure that that content is fresh or that it's not outdated, right? Going through and just optimizing those old pieces of content, making sure all the links that you have on that page to other websites aren't broken, and just kind of making sure that it's still up to par. So do we want to update a new piece or update an existing piece or create a new piece? Either way, we're going to need to find keywords. So we'll either need to find keywords that inform the new content piece or keywords to use to optimize the existing piece. We'll want to do some content topic ideation, because as good as your content piece probably is, there is likely more that we can add to it. We're going to want to do keyword research. We're going to want to identify these high opportunity focus keywords. And then from there, we're going to compile a list of those synonyms and a list of the semantically related keywords. And we're going to have two different buckets there that we're going to kind of keep on the side while we're writing this piece or optimizing the piece, because we're going to want to draw from those while we're working on it. And then we get to write and optimize our copy. So let's say that we've decided to create a new piece, and we're going to want to do some content ideation. For the sake of this, I wanted to use something that was kind of high level, basic, and very relevant to Louisiana. So today we're going to use the topic phishing. It's a great parent topic because it is not inherently related to Louisiana. So if we can rank really well for phishing or phishing in Louisiana, we can really kind of show up in those high level or high funnel searches and really introduce Louisiana as a phishing destination to people who might just be looking for phishing stuff in general. We'll want to consider seasonality. Again, phishing is very seasonal, so it's a good topic for this. And when I say this, when you're thinking about creating a new piece of content or optimizing your content, you're going to want to think several months ahead. If it's already July 3rd, it's probably too late to be publishing your 4th of July article. So really start thinking at least or about 3 months ahead. So that way, when you have time to write it, and then you have time for Google to index it and then kind of churn on it and hopefully rank it a little bit higher, so that when the time comes for that to be important content or for people to find it, it's already kind of gone through the Google churn and hopefully ranked or improved its rankings in that time. So give yourself some time before you publish new content. But as we proceed through this, we're going to want to find more keywords that are related to phishing in Louisiana. And so what I use is SEMRush. There's a handful of different great keyword tools. If you don't want to pay for a SEO tool, the Google AdWords Planner actually has a pretty decent keyword tool in it. That's where all of these tools actually get their search volumes from in the first place. So you can do some keyword research in there. It's not as good as using SEMrush or BrightEdge or Ahrefs or any of these other platforms, but it does give you a lot of the basic information that you'll need. And so you'll start kind of from a very high level topic, and we're saying that that's phishing. And what you're going to do is just search for the word phishing in your keyword tool, and you're going to see what it kind of spits out at you. It might be relevant and it might not be relevant, but I did phishing on its own without any like geo modifier or Louisiana or anything, just to see what it spits out and see what kind of topics around phishing people are generally searching for. And then I run it again for phishing in Louisiana. And I noticed that there's keywords around the license. We have 12,000 people a month are searching for Louisiana fishing license. I see that there's fish fry and fish house. And those to me don't seem like they're inherently related to the activity of fishing. It's more of the activity of prepping your fish after you've caught it. So that might not be as relevant for the fishing page. But you just kind of take a note, what's relevant, what's not, and then collect those relevant terms. And then I actually start feeding those terms back into the system again. And so one that's down here that you can't see because it's blocked by the top chart was fishing charters. And so I plugged Louisiana fishing charters back in, and then you can see all of these different destinations, people looking for tuna charters, and just different places to catch their charters out of. So now I can tell, now I know there's a lot of people searching for charters as a general term, but there's a lot of people searching for the more specifics around different species that they can catch while they're charter fishing and the different places that they can go. So now I know that if I'm writing a page about fishing, I should probably have either a sub page or I should have just a subsection about charters and the destinations you might want to catch a charter out of. So you use these to kind of inform your content and really begin to structure it. But this is if I'm trying to, again, like in theory here, write a new piece and I'm just starting from scratch in Louisiana fishing. Fortunately for us, Louisiana actually has a great section of content around fishing. So if I wanted to optimize a piece of content, which is what I would do if I were working on the state site, what I can do is drop in my domain into the SEMrush tool, and I can start applying a bunch of filters against that. So I'll drop in my domain and it'll give me a list of every single keyword that this website ranks for. I'm only really interested in fishing right now, so I'm going to make sure that the keywords contain the word fish. And I'm specifically looking for striking distance keywords that you can see up here. A striking distance keyword would be defined as anything it's kind of a broad definition, but anything that's low on page 1 or on page 2. So I do everything that ranks between positions 8 and 20 in Google. You'll see when you Google stuff, there's often millions of results for any single given keyword. So if you already rank position 8 to 20, in the relative scheme of things, you're actually doing really well in Google, but you're still not doing good enough to get any kind of meaningful traffic. And you can see here, there's a traffic estimate in SEMRush, and you're looking at like 4 clicks a month, maybe for some of these keywords. But some of them have, Venice, LA fishing. This has 6, we're saying that we have 6 estimated visits to this from this keyword every month, but there's 1,300 searches a month to it. I would say that this is a very high opportunity keyword, and the keyword above, Venice, Louisiana fishing, same deal. It has the same position and even more monthly searches, 1,600. So I know that this page that ranks for Venice, Louisiana fishing has a good opportunity for traffic to be increased to it, basically because it ranks on position or in page 2, and it has a good deal of search volume. Now, the search volume is always going to be relevant or kind of relate to the keywords that you rank for. So if you have an attraction that has low search volume, you might be looking for the higher searched words within a lower volume set. If I'm a state, I'm going to get some real broad keywords in here, and we might even find keywords that have hundreds of thousands of searches every month. So it's going to be kind of relevant to you or relative to you. But generally, I look for anything that has 500 searches or more when I want to look for an opportunity. So we're going to find a keyword with strong opportunity, and then we're going to do more research to see if there's any more related keywords that can help inspire that article. We're going to look to see how our current content is answering the keyword query already. So we're going to look at what we were just looking at, see what kind of search results there are, what kind of articles do we have that are ranking for these terms. And then we're going to maybe decide if it makes sense to write a new piece, or if we already have the content that supports that topic and we just need to optimize it. Something I see a lot with the large DMOs is that they like to create lots of content. So sometimes it's just the fact of going in and optimizing it versus creating new pieces that can help if you're a very large website. If you're a small website, it might be the opposite. So again, I kind of just already went through this stuff in those previous slides, but you're going to look for the search volume. You're looking for potential to drive traffic. You're looking for high opportunity based on that search volume and whether it's in a position that we consider to be striking distance or somewhat close to the top, because we know that that's relatively good in the term or in the relative scheme of Google. And we're really going to want to look for keywords that correspond with content gaps in our website. So if I'm talking about fishing, but I don't have anything about charters, I might want to start creating a new section about charter fishing. And then we can use these SEO tools for data like trends and keyword difficulty. So it was probably hard to see in those last charts, but you can actually see what the 12-month search trend for these keywords are. You can see when there's spikes in search behavior. So then again, you're planning 3 months ahead for those spikes and publishing your content prior to that. If you don't have like something like SEMRush or any kind of search or SEO or keyword tool, you might want to think about using something like Google Trends. It's a free tool. It will show you the relative spikes in interest for specific topics over the course of the last 12 months, and it'll show you related keywords. So that's another great tool to go into. What it does not show you is the absolute search volumes. And so you might have to use like Google Trends in tandem with like Google Ad Planner or something like that. So that can add a couple extra steps, but they're both great tools. So we're going to want to identify this focus keyword, and we're saying for today's sake that it's fishing in Louisiana. All right, so we've decided, we're going to work on this fishing in Louisiana page. And before I even touch it, I'm going to go through that process that I was showing you, and I'm going to look for 2 different buckets. I want to find synonyms, and I want to find semantically related keywords. So a synonym might be Louisiana angling or Louisiana fishing, or some of the other terms I mentioned above. And then semantically related keywords would be like catch and release, saltwater fishing, charter fishing, fishing license, etc. And the reason you're doing this is because you're wanting to make sure that when you publish your content, it is as comprehensive as it can possibly be. And so if you're writing about fishing in Louisiana, which is a very broad topic, and you're not collecting all of these semantically related keywords beforehand, you might go through this whole exercise, write a topic, and then forget or kind of remember after the fact that you didn't even mention anything about shallow water fishing or wading or fly fishing or anything like that because you were so focused on, saltwater fishing and charters. So kind of collect all of that stuff ahead of time. And think about, is it worth creating a new piece for each of these pages, or should I just mention it on my main hub page? All right, so you have these lists and you're now editing your content. So you've decided to create your Fishing in Louisiana page. When you're crafting your content, you're going to want to make sure that you include your focus keyword. So whatever that primary keyword is, and for us, again, it's fishing in Louisiana as like an exact match term, in our H1 tag, our title tag, our URL, if possible. And I understand different CMSs have different limitations there. If you're already editing if you're editing an old page, it may not make sense to just try and switch the URL. It depends on the ease and how it depends on your CMS. The alt tags and the meta description. So you're going to want to make sure your primary keyword is in all of those fields. And then you're going to want to make sure to incorporate your synonyms and your semantically related keywords, just in the content in general, because you should probably be talking about these things in your content, but then specifically in your H2 tags, your body text, which would be your P tags, and in your meta description. And so you see the meta description actually shows up in both places. Your meta description is not a ranking factor, but it is kind of like that ad that people see. Your title tag and your meta description are what show up in Google when people search for things. And so you're going to want to use that to create some enticing, almost like ad copy. And when you incorporate the term that people are searching for, Google highlights the meta descriptions in bold. And so people will actually see the keywords that they've searched for showing up in that meta description. And it just kind of entices the click a little bit more. It's very important that it feels natural and not forced. Google's done a really good job in more recent years, maybe in the last 8, of looking for natural language. But prior to that, you might remember when you would search for things and you would find these web pages out there that it'd be talking about fishing in Louisiana, but it would be like, fishing in Louisiana is great. So fishing in Louisiana, and it'd be like over and over and over, it would just say the same, it'd use the same variation of the same keyword. And it was really focused on the robots trying to pick up multiple occurrences of that keyword versus it being a comprehensive piece of content. And so I know it sounds pretty straightforward and almost obvious that you should be doing these things, but of course you don't want to stuff your content. But what happens is when you start kind of going down that SEO rabbit hole and you start reading all this stuff, and then you think, oh, I'm going to just put my keywords in here over and over and over, it can kind of unintentionally become this piece of content that's really optimized for robots and not people. And Google will actually penalize that now, and they'll consider that stuffed. And that was one of the items in the chart that I showed you at the top. You should also be thinking about creating content hubs. So this is my fun little graphic about a content hub. If I have this page about fishing in Louisiana, I'll probably mention that there's some license requirements and you got to go pick up your fishing license, but I may not actually have all of the resources for that on this one page, but I might want to link out to another page that has that resource. This could be on our site or off-site on a different Gov site. You might be talking about large and smallmouth bass, and it at a certain point may make sense to create a page about the different species. And if you really are into fishing, you might have a page for each specific species because you really want to get into that. And I would say that can be a worthwhile activity or exercise to go through, because as you're building up the content and you're really building up Louisiana travel as being the single source for all things fishing in Louisiana, because you have mentions of the species, you have pages for those specific species, and it talks about the seasonality and the types of bait that you should use for those species, and maybe the different destinations that you can catch each of them at. Maybe there's different laws around catch and release for specific species. You can really get into the gritty details and become that authority for fishing in Louisiana. And then you can have links out to the different charters and talking about the things that you might need to pack and expect on an 8-hour day out at sea. What do I need to expect for those charters? Or am I doing a guided tour and I'm more inland? What do I expect for that? And so kind of thinking about it in terms of hubs and creating content hubs is just a really great way to build that authority back to a single hub page like this Fishing in Louisiana landing page, and building the website's authority for that topic. So you're going to want to really focus on that quality content, making sure that you're providing relevance, purpose, substance, and timeliness. Like species is a good example because there's different times that different species are active. So if I'm talking about, and I'm not an expert in fishing in Louisiana, but like, let's say I'm talking about salmon trolling in Colorado. I know about that a little bit. I might be talking about doing that in the later summer months. And so I might publish that early in the summer so that that content is available and indexed in Google in the later summer when people start to do that trolling. So again, always making sure that we contain or that we fill out the proper tags, your H1 and H2 specifically. This goes all the way up to 6. You're going to want to use these as a way to create hierarchy in your content and really nest them. So there would only be one H1 tag that you use per page, but then you can use as many 2s, 3s down the line as you need to, and you nest them to kind of create content hierarchy. You're going to definitely make sure you include that title tag, your meta description, your alt text for your photos. Again, it's like straightforward advice, but it is probably the number one thing that people still continue to leave out when they're updating their content. So it's very important. Google will just make up its own title tag and meta description for you if you leave them empty, and it doesn't always read very well. And alt text is very important for accessibility. Alt text provides the description of an image within the context of a page for people who are visually impaired and use e-readers. So aside from SEO, it's important to use alt text for that accessibility. And these are what the tags look like. You probably won't actually be using the HTML tags themselves, but I just included what they look like so you can see that. But I also have a few examples from within the CMS. So Louisiana Travel is using Drupal, so I'm using Drupal examples, but I will mention a few other CMSs below this. If you're using Drupal, there is a little module on the right side of your content that says basic tags. This is where you can fill in your page title and your meta description. So the title tag, meta description, that's these two boxes here. You'll notice the keyword box is empty. So that's another thing that I'm going to kind of demystify here. We talk about keywords in SEO. We talk about them all the time. It's a huge thing we talk about. That's what we're doing, is we're trying to optimize for keywords. But a bit ironically, we actually don't want to put keywords in the keyword field. Google hasn't used this field for rankings in about 15 years now, maybe more. It's been a really long time since they've used this. And one thing it can do is show your competitors what you're trying to rank for. So if I was actually doing keyword research for myself, I would probably try and see if any of my competitors had filled out their keyword field so I could see what they're trying to rank for. So you can use it for that, but don't put keywords in this field and expect it to have any kind of impact on your website. The only thing it can really do is help your competitors. So for the Louisiana travel website, the H1 tag is the primary heading on any page like this. The H1 tag is defined in different places depending on the configuration of your CMS and what CMS you're using. And so I didn't put a backend screenshot because it would kind of change depending on who you are. But on a general level, if you are using a WYSIWYG to kind of format your content, you will see that when you drop down the font types that they set They start with heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. You'll see paragraph text in there. You'll see code block. You'll see drop quotes as like options, and every single WYSIWYG has the same options. And that's where you'll find your heading tag. So you'll just see that in the WYSIWYG of the content editor itself. And then for your alt text, this also will depend on your CMS and the configuration of that. But for the Drupal sites, we often have a module that says, okay, this is your preview image or your hero image, and here's the alt text. So we make it very easy to input that, and it's actually a required field here in this CMS so that you have to fill it in. Again, that goes back to the accessibility part. DMOs tend to get held to a higher standard when it comes to that, so we're very careful around that. But if you're not using Drupal, if you're a small CVB or a small business, attraction, and what have you, you might not be using Drupal. There's a good chance you're using WordPress or a Weebly or another CMS, which I'll kind of note later. But if you're in WordPress, Yoast, the SEO framework, Rank Math, and all-in-one SEO, those are all great plugins that you can install to get those fields that you'll need. You only need one of these. Yoast is probably the most common these days. They've really been at the top of the game for probably close to 10 years now, but I would highly recommend any of these. They all have their own pros and cons. They're all really great tools. And then you can set it up and kind of create different conventions for how your title tags are handled amongst different page types, and things like that. You can edit your site maps in here. There's a lot you can do, but you'll need one of these in WordPress because it doesn't just come out of the box like it does with Drupal. And then if you're using another, like a page builder CMS like Weebly, Squarespace, Shopify, Wix, etc., kind of a self or a hosted SaaS CMS, these typically all have those fields baked into them out of the box. So you wouldn't need to worry about looking for any plugins to install. You can just use what they've already provided you, and they typically work pretty well. And I've worked in all of these and they all have that. All right, so SEO Research Tools. I showed you guys a few screenshots from SEMRush. This is our primary SEO tool that we use at Miles. This is kind of like that suite of tools that does everything. So it looks at rankings, backlinks, site crawl, and competitions or competitive stuff. If you are just going to sign up, if you're a small business and you want to sign up, it'll cost you about $100 a month at the low level to kind of get started with SEMRush. That's probably the best package that you would need. You wouldn't really need something bigger than that unless you were a larger organization. Majestic SEO, this is just for backlinks. You probably don't need this if you're not either an SEO practitioner or the owner of a very large website. Whoops. But this is my preferred backlink tool. Screaming Frog is a really wonderful tool. It's free and paid. If you have a small website, you can crawl it for free likely. You can use this to crawl up to 500 URLs on your website for free. And it's really great because you can almost visualize in a way how Google and other search engines are crawling your website. So you can see from the first time I input my root domain to how it redirects to maybe find the www or the HTTPS version, and then what assets it finds as it's crawling your site. So, this is a really great way to just get a better understanding of your own website. You can set up custom extractors if you want to pull in certain custom fields. You can really get into the weeds with this tool. And like I said, the free version is probably good enough for most people. So I highly recommend, if this is something that interests you, download Screaming Frog, crawl your website, see what that crawl report looks like. You'll probably learn a couple things about your site. Answer the Public is a great tool. This is both free and paid. If you want to use it for free, you can use it twice a day before they push you into the paid program. That's probably, again, enough for most people. But if you're like Miles, we work on a lot of websites, so we have a paid version of it. But what this will do is actually go in and crawl Google for all of these suggested search terms. So you'll put in a basic keyword, like something like fishing in Louisiana, and it's going to go in and search the word what before fishing Louisiana, and it's going to put in a little asterisk, and it will allow Google to fill in the gaps. So it will essentially identify questions. It'll do like who, what, when, where, why, how, if, then, and really identify all of these different questions that people ask about your topic. So it's a great way to learn about things that you might not think about. That's really where I saw all these different questions about licensing or fishing licenses in Louisiana. There was a lot of questions around like, do senior citizens need licenses to fish in Louisiana? And I saw one that was like, what is the penalty for fishing without a license in Louisiana? So, you might even add a mention of that, like thinking of not buying a license. Well, it's going to be a $700 fine with the state parks and rec department, so don't do it. But you might just find little ideas that, someone's searching for it. Maybe I can include this in my content. And then GTmetrix is a great platform, also free and paid. And this is good for speed monitoring. Site speed has been important in Google for a number of years now, but this year they're going to be rolling out their Core Web Vital update, which I'll talk to a bit in a second. GTmetrix is just a great tool for monitoring that speed. So here's some quick screenshots of each of the tools that I just mentioned. So for SEMRush, you can put in your domain kind of as, this is just like a top level report. And I can see things like my domain authority score. What is the estimated amount of monthly search traffic that I get to this domain? How many backlinks do I have? How many publishers do we have our ads in for our display ads? And then we can see what is our estimated organic traffic over the last couple of years. We can see the different search features that we are represented in, how well we rank in different markets, different countries, and our organic keywords over time. It also has a really cool competitive positioning map where I can see, based on keyword overlap, who our biggest competitors are. So you can see like neworleans.com, they do really well because they really own all of those New Orleans keywords. And those ones specifically have a very high search volume. But then when you look at some of the other CVBs, the Louisiana travel site is far and away, we have the most keywords compared to anybody else here. So you can quickly see who your competitors are. And then if you're more interested in specific competitors, you can go in and insert that as well and see how well you're doing compared to those specific competitors. But I think it's cool because when I'm doing research, when I'm looking at a new website and I know nothing about it, getting that quick glance and a quick list of competitor sites just really allows me to start my research that much faster, and I don't have to go in and find and define these competitors on my own. So I really love this tool. Majestic, this will show you again, just like SEMrush, your authority score. But all of these tools are essentially trying to replicate something called PageRank, which was what Google used, or is what Google uses to kind of measure your authority in terms of all of the websites out on the web. So in Google's PageRank algorithm, you're looking at a 1 to 10 score. And that just is how highly authoritative is your website, how many backlinks, how many referring domains do you have. That, it's a proprietary term, PageRank. So everybody uses their own proprietary terms as well. So Majestic uses trust flow. SEMrush uses authority score. Ahrefs uses like URL rating, but they're all a measure of how highly authoritative your website is. It is a 1 to 100 score, and it is in a logarithmic scale. So the higher you get up this, the harder it is going to be to continue to move up the scale. There's probably 100 out of 100 websites. It's got to be like Google and Wikipedia. You're not like a 58% is not an F. A 58% might look like an F to you if you're, used to thinking about like school scoring, but actually a 58 out of 100 is a really, really good score. For most DMOs sit between mid 40s and 60s, with a couple outliers being in the 80s, but like 58 out of 100 for Louisiana is an excellent score. This is what Screaming Frog looks like when you just input a domain. And so it's going to start at louisianatravel.com, and it's going to just show me every single URL that it picks up on its journey of crawling your website. And out to the right here, there is an uncountable number of different columns of different metrics that it's pulling off of this page. But what's cool, like what I like about it, is as it's crawling, you kind of feel like a hacker on an old movie where you just see like the code flying up at you, and it feels kind of cool to watch. But what you can see is how I input louisianatravel.com in here. And the first thing it does is actually redirect straight to HTTPS www.louisiana.com, because that's actually where this domain resolves at. And so you can follow the crawler, and you can see where it gets hung up in certain places. So you might have like a paywall on your website. You know, some websites or publications have that. Well, once it hits that paywall, it's going to get stuck. And so we'll be like, okay, well, if this is getting stuck there, like I know Google is also getting stuck there. And so that means I have all this content that's hidden behind a paywall that nobody can see because Google can't find it. So maybe I need to not put all of my content behind this paywall. And it's just a really great way to start visualizing your site like as a whole, and some of these attributes that you might not even be aware that exist. So this is I'm in this tool every single day. This is such a great tool. I probably wouldn't be able to do my job without it. And then this is answer the public. So you can kind of see how when I insert fishing in Louisiana as my core keyword, it puts in which, and it didn't find anything for which, but it finds where, when, and then you end up finding all these questions that people are looking for. So when do fishing licenses expire in Louisiana, or where to get fishing license in Louisiana? Let's see. How's the fishing in Grand Isle, Louisiana? And so you can continue to put in variations of your keywords and really find out what people are searching for. Because one of the things is that you'll notice is when you're looking in the keyword tools like SEMRush, you're going to be looking at keywords that have very high search volumes. And that's great for driving traffic and kind of defining what are those core topics I want to focus on. But it kind of falls short in a lot of ways with these really long tail Q&A style keywords. So this is almost how you'll fill in those gaps, is by using something like Answer the Public. And I love this tool. I use this all the time. Okay, and then this is GTmetrix. I'm showing you a waterfall graph. This one is kind of looks like that Screaming Frog chart where it's just like a bunch of resources. It's like a lot of JavaScript files in here, a lot of CSS files. Similarly to the Screaming Frog report, it's going to show you all of the different assets that it crawls. But what makes this different is that it shows you the size of the resources and how long they took to load. And so when you're working on optimizing your website for page speed, what you'll be doing is putting your domain or your URL into GTmetrix and looking for some of these gray bars that go way out here on the right. And that's an indicator that this resource is slowing down the web page and the page load. And then you can see how big that asset is. Typically it's an image that's slowing it down, because it's very common for people to download images straight from the web and not compress them before uploading them. And so 9 out of 10 times, it's probably images that are slowing your website down, but this will quickly identify for you which images are slowing down your website, and if there's any other issues with loading. And in this case, we can actually see that this container got canceled a couple times when it was loading. And then I think down at the bottom, it shows when it actually resolved. So you can see how things try to get loaded into it and then might get hung up based on the server or just how it's being handled by this browser. And then when it finally resolves, most of it's not going to be relevant to you guys, but looking for those long gray bars that have that just indicate slow loading images is a great place to start when you're looking to just increase the page speed of your site. So I'm going to talk about a few SEO trends and opportunities. Just quickly, Google has in recent years started to become the answer engine instead of a search engine. So they're really trying to answer a lot of your questions from directly within the search engine without sending you out to another website. And so you'll probably notice that there's a lot of search features out there now, like quick answers and event carousels, and map packs have been around for a long time, the knowledge graph, all of that stuff is in a way an attempt for Google to keep you on Google and not go to a website. And so they're really becoming this answer engine. And this is another reason why it's so important to have all of those semantically related keywords, ancillary topics baked into your page, because while they're looking for answers for questions, if you have the best answer, it's going to be more likely that you get that quick answer result over somebody else. And if you're just talking about topics at a high level, if you have a fishing key or a fishing landing page and it just has like listings on it, but no links out to state parks and licensing and all of these other things that people might be looking for, you're not going to you probably won't be featured in any of the people also ask boxes or any of the voice search answers. Like voice search is directly pulled from quick answers in a lot of cases. And so you'll really struggle to perform in some of these other areas when you don't have all of the things that make it a comprehensive piece. And again, I know that probably sounds straightforward, but you'd be surprised what you see out there on the web. Here's some related algorithm updates. I'm not going to go into these as specific, but these are really where Google is and has been headed in the last 7 or so years. BERT being the most recent. I can't even pronounce this one. Bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Essentially, these are all the different machine learning layers that Google uses when they're evaluating search results. So if you're really into SEO or you want to learn more, like these are really cool things to look into. Not as important for site editors and people doing day-to-day edits on a website, but cool if you really want to like nerd out and get into some of the lower level like details of Google. Here's some just basic like SERP features that exist out there. So I already mentioned some of them, but like you have a knowledge panel, local map pack, top stories, images, site links, reviews, events, FAQs, people also ask boxes, carousels. There's a destination carousel. There's also a things to do carousel and an events carousel. So there's a handful of those. And the featured snippet or quick answers and video results. And so when you're doing that keyword research, and this isn't something I touched when I was showing you those screenshots, but it'll oftentimes show you which result types are that keyword brings up. And so if you see that you're looking at keywords that you're wanting to optimize for, and they all show that there's video results, you might want to consider making a video for that page or including a video you already have and embed that. All right, so what will help with a lot of these different result types is Schema. Schema is a type of structured data that Google and a bunch of other search engines actually went in on and created on their own. So they all kind of teamed up and created this new, more formalized structured data type. A piece of structured data that you probably are more familiar with is a table or a list. If I'm saying this is the top 10 list and then I read down top to bottom, like that is structured in a way. It's just very basic. Tabular data also is very structured. It's just a more basic form, but we don't want to use lists and tables throughout the web all the time. It would be very ugly. And so they've created these tags that you can use to wrap around things and define different entities and the relationships between those entities. Maybe there's a destination and an event that exists at that destination. We can use structured data to kind of tag these different things together and create these relationships. By doing that, we just have a better likelihood of showing up in a lot of these different result types. So here's just what carousels look like. People also ask boxes, knowledge panel, event carousels. Here's an event grid and rich snippets for events. A quick mention to voice search because it's been a very popular topic recently. Voice search has certainly been a growing area, but it's not something we can really track performance on at all. So I don't always recommend like optimizing for voice search. If you can just optimize your content and make it comprehensive, you know, if you build it, they will come, but I wouldn't always focus on voice search. Like it's just like a hot topic, but it's not something that I've seen yield tons of results. The Google Discover feed is something that's very cool. I use this every day as part of my daily digest of content. Essentially, it uses your previous browsing habits to give you a feed of content. So the DMOs can perform really well in here when people are looking at Louisiana content all the time, and you start to show up in this Discover feed. It's not as relevant as like search traffic, because I'm not searching for something at that moment, but it is a great way to bring a little bit more awareness to your brand. We're kind of cutting it on time, so I'm not going to go through the definitions of every single SEO term here that I've defined, but you can have this as a takeaway. I've already really talked about a lot of these throughout the presentation, so just you can have this as a reminder. And I mentioned this, the Core Web Vital update is coming in May, so we have about a month to really prepare for this. Here is the link that will talk a little bit more about it. Nobody should expect that this is going to launch on May 1st and crush a bunch of websites. Essentially, everybody who's using WordPress, Drupal, and all of these other CMSs have the same issues. So as those CMS creators start to fix those, you'll actually start to see better results there. But if you're a large DMO, you might want to think about it. If you're a small business, it might not be something that you want to think about. So I'll just say it like that. And here's a handful of additional resources. So I put on the search operators that I mentioned before. They're at the bottom here. Webdev.vitals is another resource for the page speed insights or for the Core Web Vitals. The Moz Beginner Guide to SEO is really like the go-to for most people for starting to learn SEO. So I highly recommend that. Hrefs blog is a little bit more advanced. I love it because they do get a little bit more detail oriented on each topic they cover. Backlinko breaks things out very simply, and I think they make it very easy to understand a lot of SEO topics where Hrefs might be a little bit more complicated. That SEO, the periodic table of SEO factors is here on the searchengineland.com website. Searchengineland.com itself, great resource, and the SEMRush blog. So all of these are great resources to learn more about SEO. And that is that. So thank you everybody for joining today. It's a bit of a mouthful, but if anyone has questions or if you have questions after the fact, don't hesitate to reach out.
If you guys have any questions, feel free to either throw them into the chat or just pop yourself off mute and pose them if you have anything you want to ask. And if something occurs to you later and you want to ask it, feel free to reach out and we can connect you with some answers for it. I know there's a lot of levels to SEO that you can definitely get into. And we can also send over some details if you're interested in them with the additional resources or that awesome periodic table of everything to know that I think a lot of people would probably like to have in hand as well. So if there are no questions though, we can wrap up and let everybody go grab a lunch. Going once.
And if you guys think of anything after the fact, I'm happy to answer them in email. I typically get more stuff probably after the presentation than I do during. So
yeah. Open invitation for any questions ongoing, but otherwise it looks like we're probably good. Thanks everybody for coming, and don't hesitate to shoot any questions after the fact. Y'all have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.